I have always considered Aslan a comical figure. His thoughts about religion in general are a jumble of pretentious nonsense, yet he often speaks with an air of self-importance that would have been embarrassing for Genghis Khan at the height of his power. On the topic of Islam, however, Aslan has begun to seem more sinister. He cannot possibly believe what he says, because nearly everything he says is a lie or half-truth calibrated to mislead a liberal audience. Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about Dr. Reza Aslan, who I'm sure you all know and love. We're not just going to deal with one of his lies, we're going to rank and order his lies by how obnoxious, how often they're repeated, and how successfully he's gotten away with those lies. So let's get some popcorn, get some Advil, sit down, relax, and enjoy the freak show. Coming in at number 10 is I have a PhD in religious history.
Well, this is an interesting book. Now, I want to clarify, you're a Muslim, so why did you write a book about the founder of Christianity?
Well, to be clear, I am a scholar of religions with 4 degrees, including one in the New Testament and fluency in Biblical Greek, who has been studying the origins of Christianity for 2 decades, who also just happens to be a Muslim. So it's not that I'm just some Muslim writing about Jesus. I am an expert with a PhD in the history of religions.
Why would you be interested in the founder of Christianity?
Because it's my job as an academic. I am a professor of religion, including the New Testament. That's what I do for a living, actually. So, I mean, it would be like asking a Christian why they would write a book about Islam. I'm not sure about that. But honestly, I've been obsessed with Jesus for really 20 years. And to be clear, I just want to emphasize this one more time. I am a historian. I am a PhD in the history of religions.
So despite saying it over and over again, Reza Aslan does not have a PhD in history. He is a PhD in sociology, which, hey, still makes him a smart guy, but there's no need to embellish your credentials. And the book he's promoting is a history book, so it does matter that he's claiming a history degree instead of a sociology degree. Now, there was a clarification on this. In a Media Matters article, we clarified that Aslan has a PhD in the sociology of religion, but this too is also untrue, because we later find out by talking to his advisor that there is no such thing as a PhD in the sociology of religions at his university. So think about what's happening here. So, Reza Aslan says, I have a PhD in the history of religions. And then people say, actually, no you don't. I'm like, well, I have a PhD in the sociology of religions. No you don't! It's just shocking to see someone lie again a second time. That's very strange. I want to be clear here. I'm not saying it's important that someone have a PhD in the history of religions to write a history book about Jesus, but he's the one that's bringing it up, and he's the one that's playing that card, so it's on him for lying about it.
Joins me now. Reza, I mean, what were you thinking as that interviewer was asking those ridiculous questions?
Well, look, I mean, truly, I was kind of embarrassed. I mean, there's nothing more distasteful than an academic having to, like, trot out his credentials. I mean, you really come off as a jerk when you do that.
Does that have to do with the Danish cartoons? I have to respond to that as the Islamic scholar, as the person with a PhD in Islam in this conversation.
Conversations, do respect your intellectualism. But there's a reason why I don't write books about neuroscience, because I don't have an expertise in neuroscience. I write books about what's going on in the Muslim world because I have an expertise in what's going on in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
He just happens to be Christian.
By the way, that's because Sam Harris's research methodology is the television. Okay? That's Sam Harris's research methodology. This is not an expert on religion. This is not a man who has done a day of field work. He speaks no biblical or Quranic languages. He's done absolutely no research whatsoever in the history of religions or the sociology of religions. He's a neuroscientist, and I'm sure he's a very good one. But that doesn't make you an expert on religion.
Well, Aslan, if it's a jerk move to pull off your academic peacock impression, why do you do it so often? Okay, so the last example on this one is an email correspondence between Robert Spencer, Reza Aslan, and Reza Aslan's assistant, whoever that is. Again, we have the notion, I am a world-renowned scholar, who are you? To be fair to Aslan, he does have a master's degree in religious studies, but Robert Spencer has a master's degree in religious studies. So they're on even footing in that regard. Also, check out some of the things that Reza Aslan is saying to Robert Spencer here. You should stick to men your own age and weight. I told you, I'm into women, not walruses. Okay, fine, I'll think about it, but first you have to shave and lose some weight. If I send you a picture, will that satisfy your lust for a while? For someone so popular in the liberal community, though, there's some interesting claims that Robert Spencer is a fat gay walrus. Nice. So, number 10 was, I have a PhD in the history of religions, which simply was not true. And for a guy who is constantly ridiculing other people's educations, he should really get his own education straight, frankly. Number 9 is, Jesus never claimed to be God or the Son of God or the Messiah or anything like that. Now, this lie comes primarily from the book Zealot itself. As you see, in one point he says, the entire first gospel, there exists not a single definitive messianic statement from Jesus himself. What evidence from the earliest gospel suggests, for whatever reason, Jesus of Nazareth did not openly refer to himself as Messiah, nor did he call himself Son of God. So in multiple places in this book, he tries to insist to people that Jesus never really referred to himself as any kind of magical being. Now, do I need to refute this one? I mean, does everyone know the Bible well enough to know that this is bullshit? Come on, right? I mean, it's very trivial. The far more important thing is that Jesus is performing magic tricks in front of people, and other people are calling him the Messiah in response to that. I don't know what more evidence you would need if we're going to accept gospel as any kind of eyewitness testimony, frankly, which we probably shouldn't, frankly. Now, Aslan, both in the introduction of his book and at several points throughout the book, insists that he's not talking about the Jesus of myth. So don't worry that I'm rejecting Jesus' divinity historically, because I'm only talking about the historical Jesus, and that really has nothing to do with the Jesus of myth. Except, there is a third Jesus that maybe we should be talking about. And that would be the Jesus of Islam, because Jesus is in the Quran and Jesus is in the Hadith. He's a little bit different, though, than the Jesus most people are used to talking about. Here, let me give you a taste. Then God will say, Jesus, son of Mary, did you ever say to the people, worship me and my mother as gods besides gods? Glory be to you, he will answer. I could never have claimed what I have no right to. If I had ever said so, you would have surely known it. So, Jesus isn't in Islam, but he's just a normal guy in Islam, just a prophet, the way Muhammad is a prophet. He's not a divine miracle worker in every sense. And just to hammer it home, let's play one more clip.
I do not believe that Jesus is God, nor do I believe that he ever thought that he was God, or that he ever said that he was God.
So hey guys, I'm a historian, and I'm just doing a history book about Jesus. Well, what a coincidence. What just totally surprising that in your expert historical opinion, the Jesus of history lines up very nicely with the Jesus of Islam, and not at all with the Jesus of Christianity. Who would have seen that coming? So what Reza Aslan is doing here, he's actually weighing in on an ongoing theological discussion between conservative Christians and conservative Muslims. It's just interesting to see him weigh in on this issue when he frequently promotes himself as more of a liberal, moderate historian Muslim who you wouldn't expect to want to be a part of this debate, which is a very tedious and boring one. I'll give give you a heads up on that if you do decide to learn more. To be clear, the problem is not that he's saying Jesus doesn't think he's divine so much. I mean, if he just said, hey, the Bible says this, the Quran says that, the Quran is right and I'm going to prove it to you, that would be fine. No issues there. But I think there is an issue with, hey, I'm a historian, and, I don't think Jesus ever really said, I am the Messiah. With no mention that you're just spreading Islamic scripture when you say something like that. Coming in at number 8 is the punishment for apostasy depends on where you are, which to me seems like a very obvious dodge to a very straightforward question, which was asked by Sam Harris in this following clip.
Reza, what is the penalty for apostasy in Islam? Just
it depends
tell us
on where
what it
you
is.
are. The Quran actually has no.
That's true, but you know the Hadith
Islam
does, and it has it in spades.
And there are 700,000 hadiths that people decide which they agree on and which they don't.
Okay, so let's talk about how the Hadiths work for those who don't know. What you're looking at right now are called the 6 authentic Hadiths because they're the ones most trustworthy. They are listed off in order of their age. The oldest one goes at the top. And the Sahih Bukhari Hadith, the oldest one, is considered the most reliable Hadith throughout the Muslim world because it is the oldest. That logic works for me. I think it should work for everybody else too. And here's another example coming directly from a Muslim source telling you that the Al-Bukhari Hadith is the most valid of the Hadith. And here we have 6 examples from the Al-Bukhari Hadith that suggest that someone who apostates from Islam should get the death penalty. Here's one specific example. The blood of a Muslim cannot be spilled except in 3 cases: murder, adultery, and apostasy. Now here's a world map that shows you all the different countries that criminalize apostasy in some way, shape, or form. The red portions would be the parts that actually give the death penalty, which includes Saudi Arabia and Iran and Somalia. So it seems like apostasy is not thought well of in the Muslim world. And last but certainly not least is a graphic that compiles various conservative punishments that Muslims support, compiled from Pew polls. Death for leaving Islam is supported by 584 million Muslims. Number 8. The death for apostasy depends on where you are. Even though the Al-Bukhari Hadith, the most valid Hadith, is very clear on the subject, and certainly in the Muslim world you see plenty of examples of that being carried out in practice. Number 7. Aisha was not 9 years old the first time Muhammad had sex with her. If you don't know who Aisha is, she is the 9-year-old girl who famously got married to Prophet Muhammad and was his child bride. But, according to Reza Aslan in No God But God, while Muhammad's union to a 9-year-old girl may be shocking to our modern sensibilities, his betrothal to Aisha was just that, a betrothal. Aisha did not consummate her marriage until after reaching puberty, which is when every girl in Arabia, without exception, became eligible for marriage. Once again, it would seem like the Al-Bukhari Hadith would disagree with Reza Aslan on this subject, and I think I'm just going to turn it over to Robert Spencer and David Wood to discuss this in more detail.
Aisha, of course, the notorious child bride of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, who, according to Bukhari, the Hadith collection considered most reliable by Muslims, was 6 years old when Muhammad was betrothed to her. He was 51, and 9 years old, he was 54, when he consummated the marriage. Bukhari says this several times in the course of 9 volumes, which is an indication that it came from several divergent traditions and was multiply attested. And that being the Hadith collection that Muslims consider to be most reliable, that has extraordinary weight, and thus has led to the low marriage ages for girls in Muslim countries. One of the first things the Ayatollah Khomeini did when he took power in Iran, Reza Aslan's native land, was to lower the legal marriageable age of girls to 9 in imitation of the Prophet. Khomeini himself married a 10-year-old when he was 28. The problem of child marriage here again is not just about a lecherous 54-year-old man in the 7th century, but because he is the excellent example of conduct, as David said, this is something that makes people suffer today.
Oh, yes it does. There are lots of examples out there that show you that conservative Muslims would really like you to make the marrying age for 9-year-old girls legal. And if you look at things at the macro level, you can see world maps of child age for girls, and you quickly notice that the Muslim world is at the bottom of the list when it comes to rights for women on this particular issue. Why? Because to raise the marrying age in your country would be to confess that Prophet Muhammad was in the wrong when he had sex with a 9-year-old girl. So they keep the marrying age at 9 for that reason.
This is Sahih Muslim, Book 8. Sahih Muslim, Book 8, number 3311. Number 3311. Aisha reported that Allah's apostle married her, now this one says 7, when she was 7 years old, but now watch this. And he was taken, and it's supposed to say she, it was a typo. She was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9, and her dolls were with her.
Now, Sam, what's the significance of saying that her dolls were with her?
Yes.
Is there any significance other than the fact of, she just happened to be carrying something at the time?
According to Islamic tradition, playing with dolls and playing with things that have images are forbidden, except for girls who are prepubescent. Ibn Hajar, in his commentary on Bukhari, actually uses this as proof that she was prepubescent, because if she had been mature, she would have been forbidden playing with dolls.
And by the way, Hilleli and Khan actually inserted that commentary into their... This is Hilleli and Khan. What greater translators are there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They translated both the Quran and Sahih al-Bukhari.
So Reza actually specifically says that Aisha, the marriage was consummated after she had reached puberty. That is explicitly, specifically contradicted in the hadiths we've been discussing.
I largely want to keep my emotions out of this video, but it's hard not to express a certain amount of contempt for what Reza Aslan is doing there. But on the other hand, thankfully, I don't think he's fooled very many people with that particular lie. Anyway, that's number 7. Aisha was not a 9-year-old girl when she had sex with Prophet Muhammad. Number 6. If you know anything about Islam, you know the first thing Prophet Muhammad did was outlaw slavery.
And as I said before, it's not enough to just simply say, well, those people, they may call themselves Muslim, they may say that they're doing these actions in the name of Islam, but that's not really Islam, they're not really Muslims. I understand that sentiment, and frankly, it's not exactly false in many ways. I mean, for instance, ISIS's notion of reestablishing slavery as part of Islam. I mean, if you know anything about Islamic history, the very first thing that Muhammad did was outlaw slavery. It was like the number one thing that he did when he established this new religious community. But
also stated, and I find this to be so disgusting about how Muhammad banned slavery. He said that on Twitter, I think at least once, maybe more, and then I think he said it one other time in an article about how Muhammad banned slavery. And that is it's just false. He banned enslaving other Muslims. That's it. To me, it's so blatant. It's a lie by omission. It's so blatant. And I'm surprised that other Muslims aren't calling him out on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not somewhat even like, bending the truth or omitting the truth. Like you say, he'll outright lie about the views of his critics and opponents as well. And
I'm tempted to just keep on moving, because honestly I think Sarah Hayter said everything that needed to be said on the topic. And if you're not following Sarah Hayter on Twitter, you should be. I'll add a little bit. So when Prophet Muhammad attacked the city of Khaybar, he put all the men to the sword and put all the women and children into slavery, and that's not at all an unusual event in the life of Prophet Muhammad. Also, there are points in the Quran where it says, if you commit crime X, Y, or Z, you gotta pay this punishment, or if you own Muslim slaves, you can set them free. So that creates a process whereby eventually Muslims become free, and it also creates a system where your slaves are very tempted to convert to Islam, because then there's a chance you might get free someday. So I think that definitely has a dark side to it. But I think we're well past the point where we're surprised by the thing Reza Aslan says, aren't we? Number 5, Hamas does not use human shields.
I know Israel's horrible, but where are the protests about crucifying people? Where Boko Haram has killed more people than Israel this year with the war going on.
But not with American weapons. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot more emphasis in the United States.
You're going to defend
in the
Hamas
West.
today.
I'm not defending Hamas. All I'm saying is that if you're going to have a situation where 1,600 people
85% of them civilians. Hundreds of children are being killed every day with American weapons
they're
that
putting
you
them in
paid
front
for.
of them.
That is nonsense.
That is not nonsense.
That's the absolute
You know what? You
These
could say this all
These are
all
terrorists
day.
who have a two-front war going on against Israel and their own people.
First of all, Amnesty International, which is on the ground right there, did a month-long review of this. They have found no evidence whatsoever of any kind of human shields being used. They did say that Hamas leaders...
Then why are weapons in the schools? But it's a war. It's a war that...
Gentlemen, please. Amnesty International found no evidence of Hamas using human shields. Oh, okay. Does anybody want to know what Hamas has to say on the subject of Hamas using human shields? Just watch.
للوصول لتلك البيت الذي يعود المنزل عفوا الذي يعود لعائلة كوارع لمنع طائرات الاحتلال الحربية الصهيونية من استهداف هذا المنزل كما هو المعتاد.
تعليقك على النقطة الأخيرة دكتور، الناس يعودون إلى الأسلوب الذي حقق نجاحا كبيرا في فترة من الفترات، نتذكر فترة الشهيد نزار ريان رحمه الله.
يعني هذا يدلل على طبيعة شعبنا الأصيل، شعبنا المجاهد الذي يحمي حقوقه ويحمي مساكنه بدمائه وصدوره العارية. أعتقد أنه أن يتعرض الناس وأن يواجهوا الطيران العسكري الإسرائيلي بصدور عارية ليحموا بيوتهم، أعتقد أنه هذه سياسة أثبتت نجاعتها في مواجهة الاحتلال من ناحية، وأيضا هي تعكس طبيعة هذا الشعب البطل، هذا الشعب الجريء. ونحن في الحركة ندعو شعبنا إلى اعتماد هذه السياسة لحماية البيوت الفلسطينية.
So this is one of those situations where Hamas spokesman or Muslim Brotherhood spokesman will say something on Arab TV that they would never say on an English-speaking news channel in a million years. And that's why the Memory YouTube channel needs to exist and should be supported by everybody, because they will translate Arab TV into English for our viewing pleasure. Can't be more grateful to them in this specific example because, you know, Reza Aslan is a guy who claims to have spent time in the Muslim world, to speak the Muslim languages, so he should know what's appearing on Arab TV, and he shouldn't be bullshitting about it right in front of us. Coming in at number 4, Iran's president didn't really say wipe Israel off the map. Why would he say that? He wouldn't say that. Of course not. Here is the offending article written by Reza Aslan, in which he tries to convince us that Ahmadinejad is a liberal that we've got all wrong. So we all thought that Ahmadinejad said, wipe Israel from the map in 2005, but no, actually, the expression wipe from the map means destroy in English, but not in Farsi. In Farsi, it means not that Israel should be eliminated, but that the existing political borders should literally be wiped from a literal map and replaced with those of historic Palestine. Okay, one, there's no such thing as a historic Palestine. There never was a country called Palestine. What do you think happens to Israel if you literally erase their borders? It's so stupid. I don't speak Farsi, so obviously I can't really challenge him on this. But even the translation seems a lot more like a bizarre reinterpretation than anything that's a legitimate misunderstanding of words. Oh, and also we have this other clip which makes Ahmadinejad's opinions a bit more clear.
یک فریاد میزنند و همه اونها با پلاکارد و مشت‌های گره کرده فریاد میزنند مرگ بر اسرائیل.
It's not so much that I want to destroy Israel. I want Israel not to exist anymore. This is a distinction without a difference. This is a word game. I mean, what does it mean to erase the borders from a map? It means the death of a country. Who are we kidding right now? Number 4, Ahmadinejad did not really say wipe Israel from the map. And number 3 is FGM is not an Islamic problem, it's an African problem.
Well, I like Bill Maher. I've been on his show a bunch of times. He's a comedian, but, you know, frankly, when it comes to the topic of religion, he's not very sophisticated in the way that he thinks. I mean, the argument about the female genital mutilation being an Islamic problem is a perfect example of that. It's not an Islamic problem, it's an African problem.
Well, wait, because he says it's a, hold on a second, Reza, because he says it's a Muslim country problem. He says that in Somalia...
Yeah, but that's... Yeah, and that's actually empirically, factually incorrect. It's a Central African problem. Eritrea has almost 90% female genital mutilation. It's a Christian country. Ethiopia has 75% female genital mutilation. It's a Christian country. Nowhere else in the Muslim majority states is female genital mutilation an issue. But again, this is the problem, is that you make these facile arguments like that.
When Reza Aslan was presented, for example, with arguments about, well, listen, female genital mutilation is quite prevalent in Muslim countries, Aslan argued that this is actually an African problem, not a Muslim problem. Now, let's look at the data, okay? Is that true? Let's analyze every claim made based on the data we have. In terms of the number of countries, there's no denying that FGM is more prevalent in Africa than in other places. However, there are still quite a few countries in the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa, and in Asia, where FGM is absolutely prevalent. Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, the Palestinian territories, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Brunei, Pakistan, prevalent or widespread female genital mutilation. It does happen in India, but it seems to be isolated to the Shia Muslim Bora community there. And Reza Aslan often holds up Indonesia as a kind of moderate Muslim counterpoint to Saudi Arabia, but female genital mutilation is prevalent in Indonesia, and there is even a mass circumcision ceremony, female circumcision ceremony, organized by Islamic foundations in Indonesia to celebrate the Prophet Muhammad's birthday. So on the facts, Lewis, much of what Reza Aslan has been peddling is just factually inaccurate.
So in addition to a long list of countries outside of Africa that do in fact practice female circumcision, the idea that happens only in Africa is false. But even when you look at Africa and compare it to Islam in Africa, I mean, if you're not seeing an overlap in these two maps, I don't know what planet you're living on. You just need to have your eyeballs checked there. And pointing to Ethiopia and Eritrea, okay, well, let's take a look at those countries, and you notice that it's not quite the Christian majority countries that we were promised. It seems much more like a 60-40, 50-50 split to me. And besides, I mean, there's 28 countries in Africa that do female circumcision. Are you trying to tell me that 14 of them are Christian and 14 of them are Muslim? That just isn't true when you actually look at the aggregate picture here. And once again, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah Hayter because I think she has another excellent point to make on this topic.
About because I read the FGM, the UNICEF study that he looked at, and my first impression was, well, it seems like they didn't really look at other countries. And so maybe I should send them an email and ask them specifically. And I did. And they told me, well, we didn't have data. We didn't have, the proper amount of data anywhere else. So we couldn't use those countries. So that's why they weren't included. Not because they didn't find FGM, just because,
right, okay.
They didn't have it. So that's such a simple step to take, to just send an email to the study's authors and get a reply. And to me, that's a very basic level of scholarly diligence, or it's not even scholarly. It's not even at that level. And Reza Aslan wasn't able to do it. And he didn't even bother doing it because this was something that seemed like it fit in well into his agenda. And therefore it's fine.
Reza, you don't think that there's anything more, there's the justice system in Muslim countries, you don't think is somehow more primitive or subjugates women more than in other countries?
Did you hear what you just said? You said in Muslim countries. I just told you that Indonesia, women are absolutely 100% equal to men.
Aslan's behavior on that CNN clip I find really grating on the nerves because he's being so belligerent towards those two people working at CNN, and he's so wrong. He's so wrong. It's like, oh, in Indonesia, they're totally equal to men, except that's one of the countries where female circumcision is a problem. It's crazy. It's crazy that he got away with it. I mean, I've seen that clip posted to my Facebook feed at least twice from my friends who were impressed by that clip and came to the conclusion that it's horrible for you to say that FGM is an Islamic practice, even though that's crazy considering what Islamic scripture actually has to say on the subject. And the silver medal goes to the Muslim Brotherhood is not a jihadist organization. Amazing.
Zawahiri, and I'm so glad that you brought this up, because Zawahiri wasn't a jihadist until he was placed in the dank and sadistic prisons of Egypt and tortured, and then when he came out, then he became a jihadist.
Well, that's actually
I in
not
no
true.
way. No, it's absolutely true.
Well,
he was a member.
Read The Looming Tower.
I know Lawrence Wright. We've talked about this. He himself, Zawahiri, was of course a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, but the Muslim Brotherhood is not a jihadist organization.
Close enough, by my lights.
That again indicates the profound unsophistication that you have about this region, to think that there is a connection between the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and Al Qaeda, that they are exactly the same thing, or
I'm
that
not
they
saying they're
represent,
the same thing, but
or that they're close
the ideology is so close in its divisiveness.
You could not be more wrong in that case.
Well, we've read the same book.
The Muslim Brotherhood, as you know, is taking over in Egypt now. And it's an organization that was founded in Egypt. It is dedicated to restoring the political aspects of Islam. It was actually founded in 1928. In 1924, the caliphate was abolished. The caliph was the successor of Muhammad as the political, military, and spiritual leader of the Muslims. And in 1924, the secular Turkish government, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who was the founder of secular Turkey, which is now on its last legs, he was one of, really the only Muslim leader in the history of Islam who has realized that his country was wrecked because of Islam. And so he abolished the caliphate, which is like as momentous a thing as if an army were to go into Rome and depose the Pope and say, no more Pope. And there hasn't been a caliph since 1924, but in 1928, Al-Banna established the Brotherhood in order to reassert political Islam. He thought it was a terrible thing what Ataturk had done, that Ataturk was an enemy of Islam, which he was, and that the Brotherhood was going to put it all right again and reunite the Islamic world under a new caliphate and spread Islamic law over the world. Now the Brotherhood, a few years back, had a meeting and mapped out its strategy and goals for the United States. This was a private meeting. The press was not invited. I wasn't there. Only Brotherhood members were there. But as it happened, during the Holy Land Foundation trial, it all came out. The Holy Land Foundation was, a few years back, the largest Islamic charity in the United States. A charity, right? Isn't that nice? You know, feeding the poor, taking care of the needy. Well, actually, they were giving the money to Hamas. The Holy Land Foundation was shut down, and their offices were raided, and it was a great moment. It was a beautiful thing, because we found out more about Muslim Brotherhood operations in the United States from the documents that were recovered from the Holy Land Foundation offices than we ever knew before. And this document about their strategic goals for the United States was one of the things that was uncovered. And it's, in first place, it contained a helpful list of the Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States. And so that's how I know that the Muslim American Society, Islamic Society of North America, Council on American Islamic Relations, etc., are Brotherhood groups. And it also said that the brothers must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that Allah's religion is victorious over other religions.
Now, if you don't trust Robert Spencer for some reason, after all, he is a fat gay walrus, according to Reza Aslan, everything he just said, you can confirm for yourself if you look up the Holy Land Foundation trial, when the largest Muslim charity got taken down for donating money to Hamas. That is a shocking display. And that incident, it implicated a lot of other groups, including CARE. And I mean, you've probably seen these two on the news at some point, if you watch the news regularly. And their group, CARE, is one of the satellite organizations of the Muslim Brotherhood. That came out in the trial, and they've recently been labeled by Muslim countries as terrorist groups. Or terrorist satellite groups, I should say. And as far as terrorist groups go, who are you more worried about? ISIS, the big, dumb group that's constantly putting out insane internet videos that we all recognize as totally crazy? Or the Muslim Brotherhood, which is much more inclined to operate behind the scenes and trick Americans into donating money into Hamas? I would say they're a far more dangerous group to watch out for.
One final thing,
he says in one of his more recent writings that he understands the motivations of some, though he might disagree with them. But he thinks your motivations might be a little bit more sinister. Okay, that's literally the word he used, sinister.
Yeah.
Okay. I literally don't know what he means by that.
The Muslim Brotherhood is not a jihadist organization.
Okay, here we are. We're at the number 1. Greatest lie from Reza Aslan. What could top number 2? What could top going around claiming that a terrorist group is not a terrorist group? Anybody have a guess? At this point, I want to thank you guys for just watching this video. I know it's a long one. And also, all the YouTubers whose clips I'm borrowing, I hope you're not offended. I just think it's important to have all of Reza Aslan's lies compiled in one place for quick and easy access, so that we can shut this guy down, because he is so full of poison. Anyway, the number 1 lie told by Reza Aslan. Yep, that's number 1. Soak it in. Enjoy the freak show. Jesus was not peaceful. He was leading a violent revolution against the Roman Empire. Now just think back to number 10, when he said, I have a PhD in history. And the obvious question is, well, you have a PhD in sociology, and that's pretty impressive. Why would you lie about which PhD you actually have? Well, remember, that interview was about promoting Zealot, the life and time of Jesus of Nazareth. And the contents of Zealot are so insane that I think he felt obliged to lie to protect the lie. I gotta protect what I'm doing here by hypnotizing people into thinking that I am unassailable when I make historical claims. And the general gist of the book is, look, you've all been lied to about who Jesus was. You know, Paul, he tried to rewrite history by making Jesus into a peaceful man, but actually, he was a guy who was trying to lead an army against Rome. Yeah, that's right. What's the evidence for this? Oh, let's look into it. Now, the obvious problem with this argument is that Jesus didn't kill anybody, but I'll show you how Reza tries to make this argument work. So the first quote here, the bandits tapped into widespread apocalyptic expectation that had gripped the Jews of Palestine. Okay, side note, the country we're talking about that Rome ruled over was Judea, not Palestine. In the wake of the Roman invasion, one of the most fearsome of all the bandits, the charismatic bandit chief Hezekiah, openly declared himself to be the Messiah and promised one who would restore the Jews to glory. The next one, it was around this time that a new and far more fearsome group of bandits arose in Galilee, led by a magnetic teacher and revolutionary known as Judas the Galilean, not to be confused with Judas the traitor. Judas was perhaps the first revolutionary leader to fuse banditry and zeal into a single revolutionary force, making resistance to Rome a religious duty incumbent on all Jews. To call Jesus the Messiah, therefore, is to place him inexorably upon a path, already well trodden by a host of failed messiahs who came before him, towards conflict, revolution, and war against the prevailing powers. So you see, Jesus didn't kill anybody, but he's guilty by association, because other people were fighting the Roman Empire, and they have a connection to Jesus. Kind of. Close enough. The next way Reza tries to make this case is to discuss the way Jesus answers a very important question posed to him by the priesthood. The first quote, it was not the census itself that enraged Judas and his followers, remember that violent revolutionary, it was the very notion of paying any tax or tribute to Rome. Simply put, if you thought it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar, then you were a traitor and apostate. You deserve to die. Well, you have to appreciate the cute use of the word apostate there. I see what you did there. I see you. Very funny. Anyway, that adds context to this part of the Bible that Reza is going to comment on. So the temple authorities, they hatch a plot to try to implicate Jesus as some sort of zealot revolutionary. Tell us, is it lawful to pay the tribute to Caesar or not? Show me a denarius. Whose image is this? It is Caesar's. Well then, give back to Caesar the property that belongs to Caesar, and give back to God the property that belongs to God. Now, you might be thinking, okay, the violent people in Judea don't want to pay a tribute to Rome anymore, and Jesus is saying, let's pay the tribute to Rome. separating him from those violent people. But this part of the Bible has been recorded all wrong, according to Reza Aslan. Jesus' words speaks for themselves. Give back, apodiomi, to Caesar. The verb apitomi is translated as render unto. It's actually a compound word. Apo is a preposition that in this case means back again. Didomi is a verb meaning to give. Apodinomi is used specifically when paying back someone property to which he is entitled. In other words, according to Jesus, Caesar is entitled to be given back the denarius coin, not because he deserves tribute, but because it is his coin, his name and picture are stamped onto it. By extension, God is entitled to be given back the land the Romans have seized for themselves. I think this is one of those moments where you just start speaking about ancient languages and you hope people's eyes glaze over and don't notice what's really happening here. You have been reading the Bible as render unto, and it's supposed to be give back. And you see how that just changes the sentence completely. Nope. No, it does not. So silly. It harkens back to number 4, trying to play this game as Farsi. Oh, we're not going to wipe Israel off the map. We're just going to erase the borders of Israel. You're changing the sentence without changing the sentence. It doesn't mean anything. And what is it supposed to mean? Okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're gonna pay the tribute, and then we're going to kill these assholes. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. Rome does not give a shit about the day-to-day affairs of Judea. You're either paying the tribute, or you're not. I don't understand why anybody believes this.
Sam Harris especially. I mean, I've never seen anyone read the Bible more literally than Sam Harris does. The most literalist in the world doesn't read the Bible more literally than Sam Harris does.
No, you see, this is what a literalist conversation looks like. This argument about whether he said render unto or give back, that in an extremely tedious conversation over what was literally said. As if the meaning of the sentence somehow just flips on its head if you swap it around. No, it doesn't. The question was, do you want to pay the tribute, or do you want to be like those other violent assholes who don't want to pay the tribute? And the answer is, yeah, pay the tribute. So let's move along. Now, this last one has to do with when Jesus got arrested. After he left Jerusalem and he's out in the woods and we're preparing for the inevitable. Jesus made sure his followers were armed as well. Jesus, if you do not have a sword, go sell your cloak and buy one. Disciples, Master, here are 2 swords. It is enough. See that? Jesus just told his followers to get swords. What's he planning? What's he up to? 2 swords, man. Yeah, bitch, we're gonna fight the best army in the world with 2 swords. Goddamn right. Continuing. It would not be. After a brief but bloody tussle with the disciples, the guards arrest Jesus and bring him to the authorities. Now, let's read the part of the story that Reza Aslan is not going to talk about. When the disciples who were with Jesus saw what was about to happen, they asked, "Shall we use our swords?" And one of them struck off the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "Enough of this!" And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Now note, Reza makes his argument with Luke 22, and I'm countering this with Luke 22. So let's not have any of that, oh, this part of the Bible trumps that part of the Bible bullshit. So what Reza's going to do here, he's going to shine a spotlight on the part of the story where Jesus tells his men to get swords, and then we're going to completely ignore the part where Jesus used his magic fucking powers to heal the men who were hurt by those swords. And the crucial part of the story is that Jesus insisted on a non-violent arrest. He cooperated with the cops. He cooperated. Also, from the book of Matthew, we have, all who take up the sword will die by the sword, which is probably one of the best lines in the Bible. Did you know that when Jesus got arrested, 2 of his friends had swords? Scandalous. Do you know that Jesus told his men not to use those swords? And healed the people they tried to hurt with those swords? Crazy. But, you know, I mean, I think this stuff works on people who don't know their Bible very well. And I think that's why it needs to be talked about. Now let's turn our attention to the motive. Why is Reza Aslan trying to do this? What's the point of trying to slander the history of Jesus by repainting him as some sort of violent guy? Well, I think for that, you need to put yourself into the mind of the liberal Christian, or the social justice warrior, as people like to call it, and think about, what does this book accomplish when you put it all together? The book Zealot gives us 2 of our 10 lies. We have Jesus was a violent revolutionary. We also have Jesus never claimed to be divine. And one that didn't make the list was this game of using the words Judea and Palestine interchangeably, as if we're talking about modern-day Palestine. Now, what happens when you put it all together? What do these 3 things add up to? Jesus was a secular man living in a complex social political era who resorted to violence to resist the Roman occupation of Palestine. Bingo! Jesus is Hamas, Hamas is Jesus, Israel and America are the Roman Empire. And if you're a true follower of Jesus, you should be against the apartheid state of Israel. This book, it is exactly what the progressive sheep wants to hear. Just drink it in. Just look at this beautiful propaganda. Just gaze into it until it gazes back into you. This is the abyss, right here. If Jesus had lived longer, he would have been a terrorist.
One very important piece here is the example of Muhammad and the example of Jesus. Muhammad was not a hippie who got crucified. Right? Muhammad was a conquering warlord. Muhammad's ethics, his life course, has much more in common with Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan than it does with Jesus or with Buddha or with Mahavira or other progenitors of the world's, quote, great faiths.
Yeah, but Jesus wanted to conquer the world. He just sucked at it.
No, well, that's one way to say it. But he was not ordering people's heads cut off. He got crucified.
Have the power to.
Well, no, that's.
Now in this clip, Cenk isn't quoting Zealot, but he almost has to be indirectly using Zealot. I don't know where else he could have gotten this argument from. I wanted to draw attention to it just to show that if I got the point of this book wrong, everybody got the point of this book wrong, including Reza Aslan's fans, like Cenk Uygur.
Just to be clear, this is not some attack on Christianity. My mother is a Christian. My wife is a Christian. My brother-in-law is an evangelical pastor. Anyone who thinks that this book is an attack on Christianity has not read it yet.
Amo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Oh, but it is. It is an attack on Christianity. How could you read this book and not get the impression that it's an attack on Christianity? It's called Zealot. The point is, Jesus is a zealot. He's a crazy maniac who wants to fight people.
I think that the fundamental problem here is that you're assuming that I have some sort of faith-based bias in this work that I write. I think it's unfair to just simply assume, because of my particular faith background, that there is some agenda on this book. That would be like saying that a Christian who writes about Muhammad is by definition, not able to do so because he has some,
he can do so.
bias against it. And
Right, because no one ever gets upset when a non-Muslim writes a book about Islam. Apostate can write a book about Islam and it's fine. An atheist can write a book about Islam and it's fine. A Christian can write a book about Islam and it's fine. Certainly not Reza Aslan would shit-talk those people. He would never do something like that, would he? Before I wrap this up, I just want to draw attention to one more part of this book. From the beginning. Today, I can confidently say that 2 decades of rigorous academic research into the origins of Christianity has made me a more genuinely committed disciple of the Jesus of Nazareth than I ever was of the Jesus of Christ. If you don't know, Aslan used to be a Christian for like a few years before he went back to being a Muslim. My hope with this book is to spread good news of the Jesus of history with the same fervor I once applied to spreading the story of Christ. That's insane. He is about to go on a rampage trying to convince you that Jesus was this man of violence, and he likes it that way. It's an improvement on the story. Okay, last but definitely not least, scholars tend to see Jesus they want to see. Too often they see themselves, their own reflection in the image of the Jesus they have constructed. Beautiful. Just beautiful.
In regard to ridicule, I think that it's important to point out that, as Thomas More said, the devil is a proud spirit who cannot endure to be mocked. And these proud and arrogant spokesmen, like Reza Aslan, I think richly deserve ridicule, and it's also an act of charity to ridicule them, to puncture their puffed up self-image and help them perhaps come back to reality. So Reza, think of this as kind of an intervention on your behalf. We are bringing you a dose of the truth and a healthy dose of ridicule that you so richly deserve, so that you will perhaps see that to spread lies and to spread this kind of propaganda, it's hurting people, it's killing people, it's enabling evil. And you're better than that.
I completely agree. Those are some excellently stated words. Especially coming from a fat gay walrus. I'm the Rational Orc. Thank you for watching.